David, we have the Republican governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, who's bragging about his surplus.
He's got a $300 million surplus.
I think he might have a lot of people that are a little angry at him, too, though.
How's that going right now, Governor? Obviously, Wisconsin was on the front pages of all the papers for some time. You still have people outside your office screaming every day?
I don't. It actually died down pretty much. Occasionally at events here or there, but if I go to New York, I do occasionally. I was there last week and said someone who said they had followed me over to Washington or to Madison to protest. But the people in Wisconsin, I think every day, every month, every week, obviously that goes by, people realize. Well, for example, like Wauwatosa, where my kids still go to school, the superintendent a week or so ago said that the tax levy is going to go down. And because of the reforms we passed, they're actually going to be able to restore the layoffs that they'd have and maintain the excellence in education we expect in that school district. We see that all over the state, and that's because we passed reforms that were bold politically but pretty modest compared to what most people are dealing with in the private sector.
Do you have any regrets on how you went about getting what you wanted in Wisconsin? If you had it to do over again, would you change anything?
Sure, absolutely. If I look back, I kind of came in with the mentality of someone running a small business who figures you got a problem, you identify it, you tackle it, you deal with it head on. In our case, I think in a political environment, if we spend a little bit more time early on kind of explaining why this was needed, doing things like we're doing right now, walking people through the paces. We took the largest structural deficit ever, and we took a deficit going in this budget, $3.6 billion, turned it into a surplus, gave our schools and our local governments the tools they need to more than offset the changes in state aid, and actually will freeze property taxes over the next 2 years, helping us create more jobs in this state. Those are things that I think people understand, but I think early on, we didn't view this as a national debate. We viewed it as a Wisconsin debate. The national powers came in. They brought millions of dollars in attack ads, and we just tried to get the job done. So if I had it over to do again, I would ultimately have laid a clear framework from the onset and be prepared for those national attacks.
The unemployment rate in Wisconsin, 7.3%. Do you think that the plan that you've laid out and the cuts will impact that negatively or positively? Some are worried it will go up.
No, I think it'll be positive. I actually think you've seen since the beginning of the year, we've had 26,000 new jobs in the private sector, about half of those 13,000 in manufacturing alone. You see our ranking amongst business-friendly states go from 41 to 24. In fact, in-state, they just did a survey a couple of weeks ago. A year ago, that survey amongst chief executives in Wisconsin showed that about 10% thought Wisconsin was heading in the right direction. Right now, as of 2 weeks ago, it was 88%, and a majority of those employers said they were going to add more jobs in the next 12 months. We've created the kind of stability that's lacking, certainly in the federal government and in many cases around the globe. We've shown that Wisconsin is a stable place long-term to invest in business and create jobs, and that's going to help us put more people back to work.
Governor, it probably is stable economically, as you just pointed out, but what about politically? This budget passed without a single vote from any Democrat in the legislature. How does that work out in terms of the future, going down the road, working together?
Well, you look 2 years ago when Democrats controlled the legislature and Jim Doyle was the governor, the same thing was true on the flip side of things. So that's not uncommon in Wisconsin. You had all Republicans and an independent in the legislature join on the budget. But you look at all the other things we passed early on in my special session on jobs. You look at since then, since the budget reforms we passed earlier this year, we've had plenty of measures when it comes to education and health care and jobs where Democrats, Republicans, and the one independent in the legislature have come together. And I believe we can get back to that Wisconsin way of getting things accomplished. We had to make some tough choices. You had Governor Pawlenty on earlier talking about his teenage daughters. I've got 2 teenage sons. I look at them and I want to make sure they grow up in Wisconsin better than the one I grew up in. The kind of debt and deficits they were going to inherit had we not made these tough choices would have put them behind the 8 ball. Instead, we're going to give them the state that's better off. It's going to help them. It's going to help the economy. And ultimately, it'll be better for education, health care, and other issues we care about as well.
So what specific elements of the budget, as it was passed, did the Democrats oppose that caused them not a single one to vote for it? More than
overall, I think after we made the changes to go from collective bargaining reform, which is really an expensive entitlement, and to move into a process that gave local governments the powers, whether it's in Wauwatosa or Madison or any other school district across the state, not only can they control their own budgets and their own destiny, push back on the layoffs that other states are seeing around the country, and ultimately, though, beyond that, they can hire and fire based on merit. Yeah. They can pay based on performance. Those are all things that the private sector has been doing for years, and we're now empowering empowering local governments and school districts in Wisconsin. That'll empower the best and the brightest in our classrooms, on the streets, and out in the work that we do across the state of Wisconsin.
Governor Walker, it's Willie Geist here. There are a lot of school teachers and public employees in your state who believe you balanced your budget on their backs. What do you say to them?
Well, I say in the end it was shared. And in my case, personally, for me and my family, lawmakers, my cabinet, as well as all other state and local employees, we're going to pay a little bit more for pension, a little bit more for health care, but still far less than the average citizen in our state. My brother is a banquet manager at a hotel, is a part-time bartender. His wife works at a department store. They pay far more for their health insurance and the little bit they can set aside for their retirement than what we're asking for most public employees. And in fact, compare it to the national level. Federal employees pay about 28% for the health insurance premium. We're asking for half of that. And interesting enough, federal employees don't have collective bargaining for wages and benefits. We still have it for base wages. So we're more generous than the federal government is when it comes to this issue. But it is a shared sacrifice, and one that's ultimately going to pay off in protecting middle-class jobs and middle-class taxpayers.
Governor, have you reached out to Democrats? Have you been able to reach out? Obviously, a lot of really bruised feelings during this battle. Are you all able to find any common ground as you move forward for the benefit not of each side's political parties, but for the benefit of Wisconsin?
Absolutely. When you look at jobs, we're looking to move together, pushing forward a new venture capital package that'll help us. I'm out at a bio conference here in Washington, D.C. That's an area where when you look at those high-tech jobs, we want to bring those into Wisconsin. Democrats, Republicans share interest in that. We're going to work together on it. Education, we brought Tony Evers, our superintendent of public instruction, Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, as well as teachers, advocates, parents, and others on a Read to Leave initiative to make sure that every kid that comes out of our elementary schools can read at grade level. Those are things where we've got an extended process. We've gone out around the state. We've heard from advocates. We've heard from professionals. We've heard from educators. We're going to move together in a process that I think is very much the Wisconsin way of bringing people together. So whether it's jobs, it's education, or even things like providing affordable health care for our small businesses, those are things where both parties can work together on.
I just have a quick question. How do you think you've evolved as a manager and a leader over this process?
Governor, it's a trick question. She asks that of every conservative every day. After the show, she goes, "Hey, Joe, how have you evolved?"
No, I know how you've evolved. I'm watching you evolve.
It goes back to your original question. I think, I came in 8 years of being executive of county government. I'm just kind of a get-it-done kind of guy. I think the evolution, I think it's a fair question, Mika, is that it's one where I realize I got to spend more time early on making the case for what we're doing, explaining it, and then go out and execute instead of just going right to the bottom line.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is
you could learn a thing or two.
That is
I think you're right.
I'm talking to Joe.
She was talking to me.
But
I think you're probably right with that too about Joe. But hey,
she is. No, that is a great lesson. A great lesson to be learned
and to be self-aware
by everybody. So, all right, Governor, thank you so much.
Thank
Greatly
you.
appreciate it. Good luck.
Good to be with you guys. Thank you.
All right.